Okay, hi, I'm Brelt West. I'm the Managing Director of Research at Morinda, and welcome to our laboratory. So today we're going to do a little tour, and I'm going to explain some things we do here, point out some of the equipment we have, what we've done with it, what we do with it. You might see a few lab workers around. Others might have cleared out for this tour, but this is the lab. This is where we do a lot of different kinds of things that involve chemical tests and biological, what we call bioassay tests, meaning finding out what our products do or what their ingredients do that have biological activity and effects on the body, good effects and things like that. So here in this lab, we have typical lab equipment around, and we do tests for quality control purposes as well. So we want to make sure that everything that's supposed to be in Tahitian Noni juice and in Max and in the various products we make, that they're actually present, and they're present in the right amounts, the right concentrations. And also we want to make sure that there are things that are not supposed to be in there, contaminants, so we do testing to make sure that each batch is to the right specifications, that it's pure, that it's efficacious, has all the good stuff and none of the bad stuff. So that's a lot of what we do. And then we do research. So I mentioned bioassay work. We do work to see what is in Noni fruit, what is in Noni leaf, what is in Noni seed, what is in our products that have a positive impact on the body. Now we know a lot of things, but we try to tell the story better. It helps us better substantiate those benefits. And we like to publish that research in peer-reviewed scientific and medical journals, and demonstrate to the world the goodness of Tahitian Noni. So let's talk about some equipment here as we walk along here. We will just come on over here. I'll show you one. We'll start here. Now this instrument here is called, we call LCMS for short. It's an ultra high performance liquid chromatography mass spectrometry system. That's a lot of words to remember. But basically what we can do is, where you saw benchtop areas and lab hoods and so forth in these different parts of the lab, we take samples. Let's say we take Noni fruit, and then we start extracting it with different kinds of solvents that allow us to pull out different kinds of phytonutrients. And then we can get those samples ready, and we put them in this instrument here, and then it will separate them all out individually. And then we use software and other technology to identify these individual phytonutrients or phytochemicals or compounds in the fruit. And then it'll tell us, based on, this instrument will tell us based on molecular weight also, the size of it, and it'll help us discover things in Noni fruit or in cornelian cherries or olives or whatever we're working on, to find out what phytochemicals, phytonutrients, another term we use, in there. And then we can either find out what is already known about these substances, their health benefits, or we isolate them out and concentrate them so we have enough samples so we can do tests with them to see what they might do for the body. And so this one here is really state-of-the-art. We've done work with this one where we identified certain iridoids in the European cornelian cherries that were reported previously. Nobody really knew they were there. And so we did use this instrument for that research. We actually published that. A lot of what we do is published, like I mentioned before, because we like to kind of prove, through scientific peer review that what we're saying and we're claiming is true. So we found those in here. We made that discovery. In fact, that was part of the development of Max, our product Max, is we had to identify new ingredients, new potential food ingredients that could be combined with Noni fruit to increase our iridoid offering and some other phytonutrients as well. And we had to bring in samples of potential candidate foods, fruits and things, and start doing the research and identifying them. And it took a lot of effort and work, but we were able to do that here. So this is kind of where the beginnings of Max were, is the research here to identify those ingredients and then find out how much are there, how much iridoids, and so for example in cornelian cherries, and European versus Asian cornelian cherries, and then start combining them with our product, with our current ingredients like Noni fruit, Noni puree. And do that here, and then I'll show you another lab a little bit later where you actually then put them all together in a format that's consumable and tastes pretty good, you know, and that's in our, what we call our product application lab. But this instrument here, the LCMS is what we call it for short. Here is this is called an HPLC. People may have heard of that term, that acronym more often, but it's high performance liquid chromatography. It's kind of like that same instrument over there, except not as fancy, not as expensive either. We use, in these things, again, I mentioned separating out the phytonutrients, the substances in there. And one way you do that is you use different kinds of what we call these columns, chromatography columns, and they have different materials inside. And when you hook them into this machine, they're under high pressure, and different kind of material in here will bind certain substances preferentially over others. And then we pass these solvents through this, pump them through there, and then it'll release them depending on the solvents we use. So maybe too many details there, but a little chemistry for anybody who's interested. Then we have these detectors that pick up what we find, and they use ultraviolet light as the method of detection. So as a substance comes out of this instrument into this detector, we'll pass UV light through it, and each substance has a characteristic ultraviolet light absorbing pattern, and you can use that to identify things. So in this instrument I can do an analysis for, let's say, vitamin C, and it'll have a certain UV spectrum that when it comes out, we'll be able to see it and identify it based on that ultraviolet light spectrum. Iridoids too. So in here we can do vitamins. We do a lot of vitamin testing. We do the fingerprint for Noni juice, or we use footprint, fingerprint. We can do that here where we separate them all out and get that characteristic, what we call a chromatogram. It's with the peaks and the valleys. We do iridoid testing with this instrument, as well as one over there we'll show you. We can detect anything, any active substance in our products that we can use. We will use these to detect for when we develop specifications, what we call specifications for quality control purposes. Again, we design a product, we make the product, and then we have certain parameters or specifications that it's supposed to contain a certain amount of active substances, so we know that they're effective. So it's quality control is a big deal. So that way we're delivering consistent quality. So let's go over here now. Again, another HPLC system, and the scientific instruments we have are only as good as the scientists using them. So I'm going to show you another asset we have here in the lab. This is my friend, Dr. Shishington.
Hi.
We are fortunate. He's been here, you've been here 12 years. 12 years now, yes. And he is a phytochemist. Actually, that's a short version of what he actually is. He's actually we could call him more like a medicinal plant pharmacologist. Essentially what he does is he's done a lot of work before with medicinal plants and at the University of Illinois in Chicago, and he studied traditional Chinese medicine in China University there as well. He worked in natural pharmaceutical product development in the past, and then we got him here. One thing he did that I'd like to point out, and I hope I don't embarrass him here, one of the first things he did when he came to Morinda is he started looking at what we call novel compounds, substances never known to have existed before, not just in Noni fruit or any other fruit, never known to exist before. He found at least two right away, and the only plant known to contain these substances are Noni, the Noni fruit from French Polynesia. So they have some biological activity that he studied and investigated as well. We published that research a number of years ago. So he's also the one that's kind of spearheaded our iridoid research efforts as well when we talked about that. So he's got a unique skill set, very useful. He uses that LCMS more than anybody else does, in fact, because he's smarter than everybody else here. So we're happy to have him. So again, the instrumentation is only as good as the scientists using it. So we're glad to have him here. Let's come on over here. We have just different equipment lying around that we use at different times. This one's a freeze dryer, lab scale freeze dryer. If we ever need to see the effects of a freeze drying process on an ingredient, and then we can test the chemical profile and see what any processing is done to it to see if it's appropriate for uses in processing our ingredients or products. And that's important too, because just because something grows on a tree and it has certain beneficial compounds in it doesn't mean it's going to be there after processing. Processing can change the nature of the product, so we have to test that. Anything we do, we got to test to make sure it's still good. Here's a little nondescript looking instrument here. I'll pull out some here. This is called a microplate reader. And this one is, we have software that drives this instrument, and basically what it does is you have 96 weld plates, and you can do certain chemical reactions or cell reactions that you need to do to shine light through it, different UV light wavelengths depending on how you program it, or fluorescent light. You have black plates here. With this, we've been able to do a lot of antioxidant testing with our products and our ingredients and compounds. I've done genotoxicity testing to make sure that the products are safe, you know, that they are not harmful to the DNA. Also have done research where we showed that our iridoids have DNA protective activity. So what we did here is had some cells that we grew, and you know they divide, multiply, and then you can add a carcinogen that's known to break up the DNA. You can measure how much DNA damage has occurred. We use this instrument with the right conditions to do that. And then repeated that experiment but added iridoids into the mix, and then measured the reduction in DNA damage that occurred. Now that actually tied these iridoids and these other substances of Noni to a human clinical trial we did at the University of Illinois College of Medicine in Rockford, Illinois, where we had heavy cigarette smokers drinking Noni juice, and we saw a reduction in the DNA damage that occurred while they were drinking Noni juice. We were able to tie those together and show these substances responsible for that activity. So lots of various things you can do with these instruments. Of course, we have microscopes. What lab does not have a microscope? It's scales and incubators. We have incubators over here where we have allow chemical reactions to occur at controlled temperatures if we're trying to monitor certain things, like certain antioxidant tests have to happen at certain temperatures, things like that. So we're going to go to another lab now, and I'll show you the product application lab. So let's go out in the hallway here. Biometric devices to limit access. Among all the many very technical and advanced things we do for testing, we also use our tongue for testing. So we also taste test each batch of product we produce, like Noni juice. We'll be taste testing these in the morning. They were made today, and some of the best analytical equipment we have sometimes is an experienced palate, and you can pick up a lot by tasting things, believe it or not. And then we have the scientific instruments to really hone in and tell us exact numbers, but you can tell a lot by tasting. So just real quick in here, a brief view. We have certain blenders for powdered products we make, such as the drink mixes, the powdered drink mixes. You know, you have ingredients, you got to blend them together. We can determine the right blending process for that. And it looks like a kitchen in here, and it is essentially a kitchen, but it's really a lab. That's lab scales here, and we record down what ingredients need to go together, and so something can taste good, and it can be usable by the customer at the end of the day. So that's really what this purpose is here, is to kind of finish off the products to make sure they're going to be good to use. So that's what happens here. Laura Robertson works here a lot. She's out of town right now, so doing something for Morinda, but this is where she works and does a lot of good development. Next, we're going into the quality assurance laboratory. Come on in here. In this laboratory, we do the similar things, but not as technical. That sounds maybe confusing. Maybe not the chemical testing, but a lot of the basic testing that needs to happen for a product. For instance, we have some bottles here of some Max, and when you buy this bottle, I'm sure you want to know that it was filled up to the right amount, right? That you're buying what you were promised on the label, that it's the right amount that's filled in here. So we have to check that. Check the cap tightness. With this instrument here, you can check how tight the caps are. We can check the viscosity of cosmetic or personal care, skincare products here. There's some attachments here, and you put it in there and make sure it's the right consistency. We check the pH, and this we use for checking moisture content, the amount of water in a sample, all kinds of things like that. Just these basic specifications to make sure the products are made the right way. So there's the chemical specifications, and then there's what we call these physical ones. And we do that. This one here, we can actually check sugar content very rapidly with this instrument right here, a refractometer. And these are the kinds of things you'd see in a lot of food labs as well. Somebody who works in food development will be familiar with this. In food science and nutrition, we'll have exposure to these things. Over here, we also have some instruments for our tablets and capsules. For instance, if a tablet's made and it's put in a bottle and it's shipped around and shaken, as it's transported, they can break apart, and you don't want to have just a bunch of powder delivered in your bottle. You want to have those tablets intact, so we can put them in here and test them and basically mimic the conditions of being thrown around and jostled around in transportation, make sure they hold together. These things here are for dissolution testing. If you get a capsule,
but it's good now.
Okay, so we're back now. Sorry about the interruption. We are in the interior of the building, and so sometimes we get a little bit of an interruption in this fortress here. So we have over here a lab scale pasteurizer. Now, in the other room, we have, of course, a big commercial size one that we use to make our beverages. But this is a smaller scale one. Again, we have these lab scale devices, so we can do testing and put our products through certain conditions to see if we're keeping all the goodness intact, essentially. And all the active stuff is still there. And we can do this testing in this small scale processing before we ever take it to the big, large scale. So we want to make sure everything is good and delivers quality. So it's just another example. We'll come in here real quick. It's the last one here. It's a little noisy in here. That's an autoclave for sterilizing things and sterilizing samples and any lab tools we need to. Here, incubators. It sometimes gets humid here, so these peel off, but this is a microbiology lab here. And so again, things that can be tested for in here are for microbial contaminants. Make sure they're clean. And so we can use that here. We can also do research. The type of research that's been done in here is, again, we had extracts from our Noni fruit, and we were looking at certain groups of phytonutrients. Sorry, that thing's going to cycle on and off and make a little noise, but we checked to see if these things would inhibit the growth of certain pathogenic microorganisms. We saw some effects there, so we published that also. So just looking at all the activities and quality of products here. So we'll come out to a more quiet environment again. So this is a kind of a real abbreviated and short tour. There's a lot more I could talk about, but then we'll get into a lot of technical details, and I'm sure that would be exciting for everybody. But we take pride in what we do here. We really like having good quality products. We like being able to ensure that they're of good quality, that they're pure, and they're good for you. And we like being able to figure out why they are, and also to be able to develop new products based on what we find out. And so that's a brief tour of the Morinda laboratories. Thanks for joining me.